I think that Bitcoin is the ideal treasury reserve asset. So for that reason, if you're selling it, you need to be selling it because there's some other asset that's better. And I don't see a better treasury reserve. I wouldn't sell it to buy a bond or a stock or a precious metal or real estate because I don't think those are better treasury reserve assets. If you're selling it, you probably need to be buying a jet or a yacht, you know, or your dream house, right? Or get married, right? You need to be buying something, a passionate thing, something of passion to save your child's life, right? I mean, I can come up with an idea as to why I might sell, but it needs to be something that involves passion, not a personal thing, not something that involves an investment decision. So that's what I mean when I say that.
Microstrategy just did what they said to never do. They sold their Bitcoin. According to Fortune.com, Microstrategy Inc., the enterprise software firm better known in recent years as the largest corporate buyer of Bitcoin, announced a series of transactions including its first ever sale of the token. The company remains a net buyer. In a filing Wednesday, Microstrategy said it acquired approximately 2,395 Bitcoin between the start of November and December 21 through its Microstrategy subsidiary, paying roughly $42.8 million in cash. It then sold 704 of the tokens on December 22 for a total of around $11.8 million, citing tax purposes, before buying 810 more of them 2 days later. Microstrategy plans to carry back the capital losses resulting from this transaction against previous capital gains, the company said to explain the December 22 sale. This may generate a tax benefit, Microstrategy said in its filing. So even though Microstrategy did sell Bitcoin, they only did so to immediately buy it back to take advantage of a loophole in the U.S. tax code. Michael Saylor still stands firmly beside the notion to never sell your Bitcoin. Let's revisit an interview he did earlier this year that reinforces his staunch drive to HODL.
I've heard you say you're never going to sell your Bitcoin. So is there any situation that you would find yourself in that you're like, you know what, I'll sell some? Or are you like planning to leave it as an inheritance for your family, things like that?
So let me explain on that. Why would you ever sell an asset in an inflationary environment if it's being priced in fiat currency, which is collapsing in value? For example, if I told you that the dollar is going to be printed and it's going to be debased 10% a year, and if you owned a house, and it was a desirable house, and you wanted to live there the rest of your life, why would you ever sell the house? Because you know it's going up in price 10% a year. And if the interest rate is 3%, you would just hold the house the rest of your life and just refinance the house. And when you need more money, you would borrow against the house because the house is going up. If you owned a football team and I printed 10% more money, the value of the football team would go up. You're not going to sell the football team. You're going to hold it. And if you need money, you're going to borrow against it. Selling a good asset normally is always a mistake. But Warren Buffett's never sold his assets. He held them forever. John Malone held his assets. Pretty much every billionaire that you know of for the past 100 years, they got that way by never selling anything, right? So the trick is you have to find an asset which is not going to be impaired, right? The reason to sell something is not because you need money. The reason to sell something is because the asset is impaired. And by impaired, I mean like sell the football team because you know no one will ever watch football ever again. Or sell the ranch in California because you know that they're going to pass a 5% a year property tax on California and you need to leave California and no one's going to want to ever go to that ranch. And sell it because it's impaired. If it's not impaired, then then as fiat gets printed, the asset is going to go up in value if it's a high quality asset. And if you were to sell it, you would get hit with a capital gains tax, either long-term or short-term, right?
Yep.
Capital gains tax is likely to go up next year, right? I mean, it's 25 to 50%, depending on where you're living.
Sure.
So, so you sell something, you're going to pay half of it to the federal government or the state government. You keep the other half, and then you're going to lose the appreciation on the asset. If Bitcoin was going up 20% a year, right, and you sold it, you would lose a 20% return every year for a decade, right? That means selling $1 million of Bitcoin will cost you $10 million in 10 years. So you lose the capital appreciation, you pay the tax,
right.
You get $500,000 to spend. Why wouldn't you just borrow $500,000?
So you're saying borrow against your Bitcoin holdings is in a way to earn.
If the asset is appreciating faster in value than the rate at which your expenses are going up yearly, you can borrow against it forever and your debt to equity ratio will fall. You see, like if I had $1 million of Bitcoin, I borrowed 100,000 against it, my debt to equity ratio would be 10%. Maybe I pay 5% interest. Maybe I pay obscene interest, 10% interest. It cost me 110,000 instead of 100,000. Okay, well, Bitcoin's going up. Fill in the number. What do you want to fill in? 20%? It's going up 200%, right? If it was going up 100%, by the way, your 1 million becomes 2 million. Next year you have 2 million. You borrow another 100,000. Now you've got $200,000 in debt outstanding. You've got, 30,000 in accumulated interest. You've got $230,000 against $2 million. Your debt to equity ratio is no worse. The next year it doubles again. And now you got 4 million against 300,000 in debt. Your debt to equity ratio falls. The next year it doubles again. Now you got 500,000 in debt against 8 million. Your debt to equity ratio falls to 6%. Your debt to equity ratio will fall exponentially to zero, right? Not to zero, but to a low number. So if you actually wanted to accumulate wealth, the number one thing you got to do is you have to acquire high quality assets that will not be impaired.
Sure.
The number two thing you have to do is you have to have a relationship with banks that will advance you money, cash, fiat, euros, dollars that you have to spend against those assets. That's the second thing. But the first thing, well, now let's come back to Bitcoin. Well, what's the highest quality asset on Earth? What's the best property you could possibly have? A city block in Manhattan? Not anymore.
Right.
It used to be a city block in Manhattan when everybody in the world went to New York City, but you can't move a city block. What if I gave you all of Park Avenue in cyberspace, and I told you that 1 billion people are going to live there one day, and they'll live there for 1,000 years? What if 10 billion people want to live in cyberspace for 1,000 years, and you could actually own 1% of the city, or 0.1% of the city? Why would you ever sell it?
Right.